Arthur Thorne, a titan of industry, dismissed the idea of true danger with a dismissive wave. My home is impenetrable. My children safe. Elara Vance, the housekeeper, offered a placid smile, a chilling promise hidden behind her seemingly devoted eyes. What Arthur found upon his return froze his very soul forever, shattering his carefully constructed world into a million irreparable pieces. The hum of the private jet had barely faded from the twilight sky above Blackwood Manor, a sprawling edifice of dark stone and ancient secrets, when Arthur Thorne stepped onto the gravel path, his heart a leaden weight in his chest. 3 weeks on the other side of the world, negotiating deals that would further inflate his already staggering fortune, felt like an eternity. Yet the emptiness that greeted him was a familiar companion, a constant echo of his profound loss. The air, crisp with the chill of a late autumn evening, carried the faint, sweet scent of blooming night jasmine, a stark contrast to the icy dread that began to coil in his gut. He had planned his return for Leo's 6th birthday, hoping to surprise his son, to perhaps bridge the chasm that had grown between them since his wife's departure, a chasm deepened by his own inability to truly connect, to fully feel. The grand oak doors, usually standing sentinel, were ajar, a sliver of golden light spilling onto the manicured lawn. An unusual silence hung heavy, not the usual boisterous energy that even 2 small children could generate in such a vast space. Arthur's footsteps, usually confident and purposeful, hesitated on the polished marble of the foyer. A faint, muffled sound reached his ears, a desperate whimper, followed by a choked sob that twisted his stomach into knots. He moved through the opulent living room, past priceless antiques and towering portraits, his eyes scanning for any sign of life, any familiar presence. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the frantic beat of his own heart. He found himself drawn towards the back of the house, where the heated indoor pool shimmered, usually a source of joy for his children. The door to the pool area was slightly ajar, and the muffled sounds grew clearer, sharper. A child's terrified cry, thin and reedy, pierced the quiet. "No, Elara, please! I didn't mean to." It was Leo, his small voice trembling with an unimaginable fear. Arthur's blood ran cold. He pushed the door open, his hand shaking, and the scene that unfolded before him stole the very air from his lungs, leaving him gasping for breath in the sudden, humid warmth. Elara Vance, the housekeeper, usually so poised and demure in her crisp uniform, stood by the edge of the sparkling blue water, her back to Arthur. Her posture was stiff, rigid, and her voice, usually soft and melodious, was laced with a chilling, low growl. "You clumsy, ungrateful boy. You ruined it. Now you'll learn your lesson, won't you?" Her hand, surprisingly strong, was clamped around Leo's small arm, his face contorted in pure terror, tears streaming down his cheeks. His usually bright blue eyes, now wide and pleading, locked onto his father's, a silent scream for help. "Daddy! Daddy, please! Make her stop!" Arthur's vision blurred. The opulent surroundings of the pool room, with its intricate mosaic tiles and lush tropical plants, dissolving into a nightmarish tableau. Elara, startled by his sudden appearance, spun around, her face a mask of feigned surprise that quickly morphed into something far more sinister, a flicker of cold malice in her eyes. Her grip on Leo tightened for a fraction of a second before she released him, pushing him slightly, almost imperceptibly, towards the water. Leo stumbled, his small body, already fragile due to his special needs, teetering precariously close to the edge. Arthur lunged forward, his mind a whirlwind of horror and disbelief, his voice a raw, primal roar. "Elara, what in God's name are you doing?" The image of his son, pale and trembling, his small hand reaching out for him, would forever be etched into the darkest corners of his memory. This was not the home he had left, nor the woman he had trusted. This was a nightmare, given terrifying, tangible form. The silence that followed Arthur's outburst was deafening, punctuated only by Leo's ragged breathing and the gentle lapping of the pool water. Ilara, regaining her composure with astonishing speed, turned to Arthur, her expression now a picture of concern, her hands fluttering nervously. "Mr. Thorne, you're back. Oh, thank heavens you're here. Leo was being so clumsy he almost fell in. I was just trying to steady him. He's so restless on his birthday, isn't he? We were having such a lovely time, preparing for his little party." Her words, a practiced cascade of sweetness and innocence, grated against Arthur's ears, each syllable a blatant lie that twisted the knife deeper into his heart. He saw the subtle tremor in Leo's lip, the way his son flinched almost imperceptibly at Ilara's presence, and a fierce, protective rage, dormant for too long, ignited within him. He scooped Leo into his arms, holding his fragile son close, feeling the rapid thump of the boy's heart against his own, his gaze never leaving Ilara's face, searching for the truth hidden beneath her polished facade. His beloved Lily. Where was she? The thought sent another jolt of icy fear through him. Arthur's protective grip tightened around Leo, whose small body trembled against his. The question of Lily's whereabouts, a sudden cold dread, gnawed at him, pushing aside the lingering shock of what he had just witnessed. He had always prided himself on his ability to control every aspect of his life, his empire. But here, in the sanctuary of his own home, he felt utterly powerless, a stark revelation that hit him with the force of a physical blow. Ilara, ever the picture of composed domesticity, offered a saccharine smile, her eyes, however, betraying a flicker of something unreadable, something cold and distant. She assured him Lily was napping, a perfect angel in her room, suggesting perhaps Arthur was simply tired from his long journey and misunderstanding a playful moment between Leo and herself. Her words, smooth as polished glass, tried to weave a tapestry of normalcy, but Arthur could see the frayed edges, the desperate attempt to conceal a darker truth. He had become a ghost in his own life after his wife's departure, a vibrant light extinguished too soon during the very act of bringing Leo into the world. Her loss had carved an unfillable void in his soul, leaving him adrift in a sea of grief so profound that he had sought refuge in the relentless pursuit of wealth, burying himself in boardrooms and international deals. Blackwood Manor, once a home filled with laughter and the promise of a shared future, had transformed into a gilded cage, a monument to his sorrow. He had entrusted the care of his precious children, Leo, now 6, and his younger sister, Lily, a delicate 4-year-old with her mother's sparkling eyes, to a rotating staff, eventually settling on Ilara Vance as the head housekeeper and primary caregiver. He had seen her as efficient, discreet, and seemingly devoted, a woman who projected an aura of unwavering competence, a perfect solution for a man who found comfort only in the sterile world of business. He had paid her handsomely, believing that money could buy peace of mind, a surrogate for the emotional presence he could no longer offer. His guilt, a constant, dull ache, had been momentarily assuaged by her reassuring reports, her calm demeanor, allowing him to retreat further into his work, convincing himself that his absence was a necessary sacrifice for their future. Ilara Vance, however, harbored a deep-seated resentment beneath her impeccable facade, a simmering bitterness that had festered over years of perceived slights and unfulfilled desires. She had come from a humble background, her life a constant struggle against the tide of poverty, and the opulence of Blackwood Manor, Arthur's seemingly effortless wealth, fueled a toxic cocktail of envy and avarice within her. She saw Arthur as a man who had everything, yet appreciated nothing, especially not the precious children who were, in her twisted view, merely obstacles to her own advancement. She believed the children, particularly Leo, with his gentle, often fragile nature, were an unnecessary burden on the estate, a drain on resources that could be hers. Her ultimate goal was to secure a more permanent, lucrative position, perhaps even a share of the family fortune. And to achieve this, she needed Arthur to be pliable, dependent, and utterly convinced of her indispensable loyalty. The children, in her cold calculations, were simply pawns in her grand design, easily manipulated or, if necessary, removed from the equation. Arthur, still clutching Leo, walked purposefully towards Lily's room, the anger in his chest now mingled with a growing sense of dread and a crushing wave of self-reproach. He had been blind, willfully so, wrapped in his own grief, allowing a stranger to become the primary architect of his children's lives. He pushed open the door to Lily's sun-drenched nursery, a room adorned with soft pastels and whimsical murals, expecting to find her peacefully asleep. Instead, Lily sat huddled in a corner, her small face buried in her knees, a silent, trembling heap. Her favorite teddy bear lay discarded on the floor, its button eye staring blankly upwards. She didn't stir at his entry, her small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Ilara, following closely behind Arthur, immediately rushed to Lily's side, her voice a cooing whisper, attempting to soothe the child, to perhaps silence her before she could utter a single word. "Oh, my sweet Lilybug, what's wrong? Did you have a bad dream? Come, let Ilara make it all better." But Lily flinched away from her touch, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, pressing herself harder into the corner, a clear rejection that sent a fresh wave of icy fear through Arthur. He knelt, extending his hand, his voice a gentle, reassuring murmur. "Lilybug, it's Daddy. I'm home." Her head slowly lifted, her eyes, red-rimmed and swollen, meeting his, and in their depths he saw not just fear, but a profound, heartbreaking plea for rescue. It was a silent testament to a terror far deeper than any bad dream. Arthur's heart constricted with a pain far sharper than any business defeat as he witnessed Lily's profound rejection of Ilara, a silent scream more potent than any spoken word. He knelt fully, pulling Lily gently into his embrace, her small body stiff with fear, then slowly relaxing into his warmth. Her tiny hands, still trembling, clutched at his shirt, burying her face into his shoulder, her sobs finally breaking free, raw and heartbreaking. Ilara, her composure momentarily fractured, quickly recovered, her voice a practiced balm. "Oh, Mr. Thorne, she's simply overwhelmed." Children can be so dramatic when they're tired, can't they? Perhaps a warm bath and an early night will calm her nerves. Her eyes, however, darted nervously between Arthur and the sobbing child, a silent warning in their depths. Arthur, his jaw tight, simply nodded, his gaze unwavering as he scooped Lily into one arm, still holding Leo's hand. A silent barrier erected between his children and the woman who now stood before him, her mask of devotion slipping just enough to reveal the cold calculation beneath. He felt an instinctual shift, a primal alarm ringing through his entire being, telling him that the comfortable facade of his household had shattered, revealing a truth he could no longer ignore. Over the next few days, a chilling mosaic of disturbing details began to form in Arthur's mind, each piece a stark testament to the insidious darkness that had crept into Blackwood Manor. Leo, usually an energetic and curious boy, despite his delicate constitution, became withdrawn, his laughter replaced by a quiet timidity, his eyes frequently downcast. Arthur noticed a small, faded bruise on Leo's upper arm, a discoloration that Ilara quickly dismissed as a playground mishap, a minor tumble during a supervised outdoor activity. Lily, too, showed subtle changes. Her once bright, inquisitive gaze now held a shadow of apprehension, and she would often clutch at Arthur's leg, seeking reassurance, especially when Ilara entered the room. He observed that certain doors, particularly to the children's play area and their shared bedroom, were often locked from the outside when Ilara was ostensibly supervising, a detail she explained away as a safety measure to prevent the children from wandering off or accessing dangerous areas. Though Arthur knew his home was meticulously child-proofed, the children's once vibrant drawings, usually filled with bright colors and joyful figures, now featured darker hues, solitary figures, and often, strangely, images of shadowy, faceless adults. Ilara, ever the chameleon, seamlessly alternated between an almost suffocating subservience towards Arthur and a subtle, insidious cruelty directed at the children, often when she believed Arthur's attention was elsewhere. She would dote on Arthur, anticipating his every need, her voice soft and deferential. Yet Arthur caught glimpses of her eyes hardening, her smile tightening, whenever the children made a request or a slight mistake. He heard snippets of her sharp whispers, quickly silenced upon his approach, directed at Leo for spilling a drink, or at Lily for not finishing her meal. One evening, he found Leo sitting alone in the vast dining room long after dinner had ended, staring at a plate of uneaten vegetables, his small shoulders slumped, Ilara explaining that he was simply being stubborn and needed to learn discipline. Arthur felt a surge of indignation, remembering his wife's gentle approach to their children's mealtimes, always prioritizing nurture over rigid rules. The sheer scale of his neglect, the depth of his self-imposed blindness, pressed down on him, a heavy, suffocating blanket of guilt. He had outsourced his most sacred duty, allowing his grief to twist his priorities, and now his children were suffering the profound consequences. His wife, Clara, had been the very heart of their home, her presence a warm, steady flame that had illuminated every corner of Blackwood Manor. Her departure during Leo's birth had plunged Arthur into a darkness from which he had never fully emerged, leaving a gaping wound that he had tried to cauterize with work and detachment. Now, a different kind of pain, a burning shame, fueled a burgeoning resolve within him. He remembered Clara's meticulous nature, her habit of documenting everything, especially matters concerning their children. He recalled a small, ornate wooden box she kept on her bedside table, a sanctuary for her most cherished memories and thoughts. He had never dared open it after her passing, fearing the fresh wave of sorrow it might unleash. But now, a desperate hope flickered within him. He wondered if, perhaps, in her infinite wisdom and foresight, Clara might have left some guidance, a hidden message, a clue that could help him navigate this terrifying new reality. The thought became a silent promise, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. He would find that box, and he would begin to unravel the truth, for his children, for Clara, and for the father he was only just beginning to become. The decision to actively investigate, to peel back the layers of deceit, solidified in Arthur's mind, a quiet, unwavering vow. He began to observe Ilara with a new intensity, his senses heightened, every word, every gesture, every subtle shift in her demeanor scrutinized. He noticed how her eyes would linger on certain expensive artifacts in the manor, a covetous gleam flashing in their depths, how she would subtly steer conversations towards Arthur's financial affairs, her questions seemingly innocuous, but laced with an underlying curiosity about his assets and investments. The children, sensing his renewed presence, his unwavering attention, slowly began to tentatively open up, their small voices softer, their movements less guarded. Lily, nestled in his lap one evening, traced a small, almost invisible scar near her wrist, her tiny finger brushing against it, a faint whisper escaping her lips. Ilara said I was bad. The words were a soft, chilling indictment, a confirmation of Arthur's deepest fears, and the protective rage within him solidified, burning away the last vestiges of his grief-induced apathy. He knew, with a terrifying certainty that he was at the precipice of a battle not just for his children's well-being, but for their very souls. The small, almost imperceptible scar on Lily's wrist and her whispered words, "Ilara said I was bad," resonated through Arthur like a discordant chime, shattering any lingering doubts. The image of Leo's terrified face by the pool, Lily's silent sobs in the corner of her room, and now this chilling detail coalesced into an undeniable truth. His children were living under a shadow of fear, and Ilara Vance was its architect. His grief, once a paralyzing force, now transmuted into a searing, protective anger, a fire in his belly that demanded action. He kissed Lily's forehead, a silent promise etched into his soul, and tucked her gently into bed, a renewed vigilance sharpening his senses. The opulent halls of Blackwood Manor, once a refuge, now felt like a battleground, and he was finally ready to fight. That night, sleep offered no solace, only restless images of his children's frightened eyes. Arthur moved through the silent house like a phantom, his footsteps soft on the plush carpets, his mind racing, piecing together fragments of memory, subtle cues he had dismissed in his self-imposed emotional exile. He remembered Clara's insistence on a meticulously organized study, a room she often used for managing household affairs and personal correspondence. He also recalled her small, ornate wooden box, a treasure chest of her most intimate thoughts and mementos, which she had kept hidden, a private sanctuary. He had always respected that privacy, even after her departure, but now the desperate need for answers propelled him forward. He found the study door slightly ajar, a faint light emanating from within, a detail that immediately raised his suspicions. Ilara, usually so meticulous about energy conservation, would never leave a light on. He approached cautiously, his heart thudding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Through the narrow opening, he saw Ilara, not in her usual crisp uniform, but in a dark, flowing dressing gown, her back to him, hunched over his large mahogany desk. The soft glow of the desk lamp illuminated her hands, which were sifting through a stack of documents, papers that Arthur recognized as sensitive financial statements. A small, intricately carved wooden box, Clara's box, lay open beside her, its contents spilling out: faded photographs, a dried flower, and a sheaf of delicate handwritten letters. A wave of cold fury washed over Arthur. This was not the act of a devoted housekeeper, but of a calculating intruder, desecrating the memory of his beloved wife and prying into the most vulnerable aspects of his life. He watched, hidden in the shadows, as Ilara's fingers expertly scanned the documents, a predatory focus in her posture, a subtle smile playing on her lips as she tucked a small, folded piece of paper into the pocket of her gown, then quickly rearranged the other documents, closing Clara's box with a soft click. The sight of Ilara rifling through his private papers, and worse, Clara's cherished box, ignited a cold, hard resolve within Arthur. He waited until she had extinguished the light and quietly retreated from the study, her footsteps fading down the hallway. Only then did he enter, the air still thick with the scent of her perfume and the unsettling aura of her intrusion. He moved to the desk, his fingers tracing the outline of Clara's box, a profound sense of violation churning within him. He opened it, his gaze falling upon the remaining contents. Among the sentimental items, a small, elegant silver locket, Clara's favorite, was missing. He remembered it distinctly, always nestled amongst her letters. A tremor of disbelief, then certainty, coursed through him. This was not just manipulation. It was theft, a calculated act of avarice. His eyes then caught sight of a loose page at the bottom of the box, a letter written in Clara's elegant script, dated just weeks before Leo's birth. The words blurred through his vision, but a few phrases leapt out, stark and prophetic. A strange uneasiness about Ilara, Her eyes hold a coldness. Watch over the children, my love, always. Clara, in her infinite wisdom, had seen it, had tried to warn him. A profound guilt, sharper than any he had felt before, pierced him. He had been too blind, too consumed by his own sorrow, to heed her subtle warnings, to protect his family as she would have. The following morning, Arthur maintained a veneer of normalcy, observing Alara with a detached, clinical gaze. He noticed the subtle shift in her demeanor, a heightened alertness, as if she sensed his scrutiny. She continued her duties with practiced efficiency, but her movements were slightly stiffer, her smiles a fraction too wide. He made an excuse to check the household accounts, a task he usually delegated, and discovered several unauthorized expenditures, small at first glance, but accumulating into a significant sum, disguised as gardening supplies or minor repairs. The receipts, hastily forged, bore the hallmarks of her hand. The revelation solidified his suspicions. Ilara was systematically siphoning funds, a silent parasite feeding on his grief and trust. He spent more time with Leo and Lily, engaging them in gentle conversation, reading them stories, drawing out their laughter. He saw the way their eyes, once shadowed, began to sparkle with a nascent joy, how their small hands, once hesitant, now reached for his with uninhibited affection. He learned that Ilara would often lock them in their rooms during the day, telling them their father was too busy to be bothered, or that they were being naughty, reinforcing their sense of isolation. His heart ached with every new detail, but with each shared moment, the bond between them strengthened, weaving a new tapestry of trust and love, a protective shield against the encroaching darkness. He knew what he had to do, and the truth, once a terrifying unknown, now felt like a weapon, sharp and ready. Arthur's renewed presence and unwavering attention shifted the atmosphere in Blackwood Manor, a subtle tremor unsettling the carefully maintained facade of domestic bliss. Ilara, sensing the delicate balance of her carefully constructed deception beginning to tilt, became both more cautious and, paradoxically, more brazen in her attempts to maintain control. Her smiles grew brittle, her reassurances hollow, especially as Arthur began to implement subtle changes. He insisted on being present during mealtimes, taking the children to their play area himself, and reading them bedtime stories, activities he had long neglected, now infused with a desperate urgency. During these precious moments, he would gently ask about their day, their friends, anything that might prompt them to speak freely, to unveil the hidden terrors they had endured. Lily, with her tender spirit, was the first to offer a new, fragmented piece of the puzzle, her small voice barely a whisper against his ear one afternoon, as they gardened together, planting vibrant petunias in a sun-drenched patch. "Ilara, she took my drawing away. She said it was ugly. It had you and Mommy and us." Her eyes, usually so bright, clouded with a profound sadness that mirrored Arthur's own grief, a raw wound reopened by this fresh insight into Ilara's cruelty. The drawing, a simple crayon rendition of their family, had been a symbol of their unity, and Ilara's act was a deliberate, cruel attempt to sever that emotional cord, to isolate the children from the memory of their departed mother and their father. Arthur's chest tightened, realizing the insidious extent of Ilara's psychological manipulation, her systematic efforts to diminish their sense of self-worth and their precious connections. He gently squeezed Lily's hand, his voice a steady, comforting balm, promising her that every drawing she made was beautiful and that he would cherish them all, a silent vow to reclaim the shattered fragments of their joy. Leo, though more reserved, displayed his fear through a heightened sensitivity to Ilara's presence, his small body tensing whenever she entered a room. One evening, Arthur watched as Ilara, believing herself unobserved, sharply corrected Leo for a minor spill at dinner. Her voice dropping to a low, menacing tone that sent shivers down Arthur's spine, a chilling echo of the scene by the pool. He saw Leo flinch, his small hand instinctively reaching for the edge of the table, his eyes wide with a familiar terror that spoke volumes. Later that night, Arthur found Leo clutching a worn photograph of Clara, tears silently tracing paths down his cheeks, a silent testament to his enduring sorrow. When Arthur asked what was wrong, Leo simply pointed to the picture, then made a small, trembling gesture towards the door, whispering, "She doesn't like Mama." It was a simple statement, yet it spoke volumes, confirming Ilara's deep-seated resentment and her attempts to erase Clara's loving memory from the children's lives, an act of emotional sabotage that cut Arthur to his core. Arthur knew he needed more than the children's heartbreaking testimonies and his own observations, however poignant. He needed irrefutable proof, something that would stand up to scrutiny, to the cold, hard gaze of justice. He was a man of logic and strategy, and he would use his formidable resources to uncover the full extent of Ilara's malice. Discreetly, leveraging his vast network of contacts, he arranged for the installation of tiny, high-definition cameras throughout the children's wing and in key common areas, ensuring they were hidden from plain sight, their presence undetectable, silent sentinels watching over his precious family. He also hired a private investigator, a former police detective known for his discretion and thoroughness, tasking him with delving into Ilara Vance's past, searching for any anomalies, any hidden histories that might explain her sinister motives. The investigator's initial findings were unsettling. Ilara had a history of short-term employment, often leaving jobs abruptly, and a pattern of financial difficulties despite seemingly good wages. There were also whispers of a past legal dispute, a minor inheritance case where she was accused of attempting to manipulate an elderly relative, though the case was ultimately dismissed due to lack of concrete evidence, a chilling premonition of her current designs. One night, as the mansion settled into a deceptive calm, its opulent halls cloaked in shadow, Arthur reviewed the first day's footage from the hidden cameras. His stomach churned with a nauseating dread as he watched Ilara's true face emerge from behind her practiced smile. He saw her deliberately trip Leo, making it look like an accident, then scold him harshly for being clumsy, her voice devoid of warmth. He witnessed her snatch Lily's drawing, a vibrant burst of childish imagination, crumpling it into a ball and tossing it into a waste bin with a sneer, telling the little girl that her art was a waste of time, a cruel dismissal that twisted Arthur's gut. He saw her lock the children in their playroom for hours, ignoring their soft pleas, their tiny hands pressing against the door, while she relaxed in the living room, scrolling through her phone, occasionally pausing to gaze covetously at a priceless painting, her eyes gleaming with avarice. The footage was a cold, hard blow, confirming his worst fears and igniting a white-hot fury within him. This was not merely neglect. This was calculated emotional and psychological abuse, designed to break their spirits, to make them subservient and fearful, a monstrous betrayal of trust. The evidence was damning, a visual record of a monster masquerading as a caregiver, and Arthur felt the weight of it, a silent scream for retribution. He continued to watch, his heart aching with every cruel gesture, every dismissive word, the sheer scope of her malice unfolding before him. The cameras also captured Ilara making hushed phone calls, her voice low and conspiratorial, discussing the plan and the timeline with an unknown party. She spoke of Arthur's blindness and the children's fragility, hinting at ways to further secure her position, perhaps even suggesting that Arthur's emotional state made him unfit to manage his own affairs, a potential angle for future manipulation of his inheritance. The pieces of Ilara's grand scheme, once fragmented and hazy, were beginning to interlock, revealing a meticulously crafted plot, rooted in deep-seated greed and a chilling lack of empathy. Arthur felt a surge of cold determination. He had allowed his grief to blind him, but now, with the truth laid bare before him, he would not falter. He would protect his children, no matter the cost, and ensure that Alara Vance faced the full, unyielding force of justice. The evidence was mounting, a silent scream for retribution, and Arthur was ready to deliver it, his resolve as unyielding as the ancient stones of Blackwood Manor itself. The sheer weight of the evidence, captured in stark, undeniable pixels, pressed down on Arthur Thorne, a suffocating blanket woven from betrayal and agonizing regret. He watched the replay of Alara's callous actions, her calculated cruelty, the way she extinguished the light in his children's eyes, and a cold, unwavering resolve settled deep within his bones. The images of Leo's small body trembling, Lily's drawing crumpled and discarded, were not just proof of abuse. They were a searing indictment of his own absence, his self-imposed emotional exile that had left his most precious treasures vulnerable. The grief for Clara, once a paralyzing force, now transmuted into a burning, righteous anger, a protective fire that consumed all doubt. He would not merely bring Alara to justice, he would dismantle her carefully constructed web of deceit, thread by insidious thread, ensuring she could never again inflict such pain upon an innocent soul, especially not his own children. In the days that followed, a fragile but profound transformation began to blossom within Blackwood Manor, nurtured by Arthur's unwavering presence. He spent every possible moment with Leo and Lily, reading them stories with voices he hadn't known he possessed, building towering forts out of cushions, and simply holding them close, allowing their small, trusting hands to reawaken the dormant warmth within him. Lily, once a silent shadow, began to draw again, her crayons dancing across the paper with renewed vibrancy, depicting a smiling father, a radiant mother, and herself and Leo, holding hands, bathed in sunshine. She would proudly present each masterpiece to Arthur, her eyes sparkling, seeking his approval, her small voice chattering about the colors and shapes. Leo, too, slowly shed his timidity, his laughter echoing through the halls, a melody Arthur had yearned to hear for so long. He would lean into his father's embrace, his small hand instinctively seeking Arthur's, a silent testament to the burgeoning trust that was healing the wounds of neglect. Their newfound joy, however, was a stark contrast to Alara's increasingly strained demeanor. The private investigator, a man named Marcus Vance, no relation to Alara, a fact that had initially caused a brief, ironic pause, delivered his latest findings, a thick dossier filled with meticulously gathered information that painted an even darker portrait of Alara's past. It revealed a pattern of calculated predation, a history of targeting wealthy, often grieving families, insinuating herself into their lives, and systematically siphoning funds or attempting to manipulate wills. There was a particularly disturbing account of an elderly widow in Florida whose substantial estate Alara had attempted to gain control of, leveraging the woman's declining mental state and isolating her from relatives, a scheme foiled only by the timely intervention of a distant niece. The case, though never formally brought to trial due to the victim's reluctance to testify, bore chilling similarities to Alara's current machinations, confirming her long-standing ambition to secure a fortune through deceit and emotional exploitation. Arthur, armed with this damning knowledge, decided to set a subtle trap, a final confirmation of Alara's avarice. He intentionally left a small antique silver music box, a cherished family heirloom, on a visible surface in his study, a place he knew Alara frequented during her nightly rounds. He then set one of the hidden cameras to focus specifically on it, creating a perfect vantage point. The next morning, the music box was gone. When Arthur casually inquired about its whereabouts, Alara, ever the picture of feigned innocence, offered a convoluted explanation about having put it away for safekeeping in a place she now couldn't quite recall, her eyes darting nervously, her voice betraying a barely perceptible tremor. The lie was as transparent as glass, a final, undeniable confirmation of her thieving hands, a small but significant piece of the puzzle that solidified Arthur's resolve. Elara, despite her practiced composure, could no longer completely conceal the subtle cracks in her facade. She sensed the shift in Arthur, the cold, analytical gaze that now followed her movements, the unwavering attention he now bestowed upon his children. Her smiles became brittle, her reassurances to Arthur sounding increasingly hollow, laced with a desperate undertone. She tried to reassert her control, attempting subtle intimidation tactics with the children. A sharp word here, a dismissive wave there. But Arthur was always there, a silent, unyielding guardian. He would immediately counter her negativity with warmth, her criticism with praise, effectively neutralizing her attempts to sow fear. The power dynamics in the manor had irrevocably shifted, and Elara, once the silent manipulator, now found herself under an unblinking, unforgiving spotlight, her carefully constructed illusion of devotion rapidly crumbling around her. Marcus Vance's investigation yielded another crucial breakthrough. The missing silver locket, Clara's cherished possession, had been pawned at a small, nondescript shop in a neighboring town. The pawn ticket, bearing Elara Vance's signature and an outdated identification, was irrefutable proof of the theft. The locket itself, though simple in design, held immense sentimental value, a symbol of Clara's enduring love. The investigator also managed to intercept a coded message, sent from Elara's secondary, untraceable phone to an offshore account, detailing her recent successes and outlining plans for Phase 2, which explicitly mentioned manipulating Arthur into signing over certain financial powers, leveraging his emotional instability following Clara's departure. The depth of her calculated malice, the cold, clinical precision of her scheme, was breathtaking in its audacity. Arthur held the pawn ticket in his hand, the small slip of paper feeling heavier than any business contract he had ever signed. The locket, a tangible piece of Clara, had been desecrated, monetized by the very woman he had entrusted with his children's well-being. The intercepted message, outlining her sinister plans for his estate, confirmed the full, terrifying scope of her ambition. The pieces were all in place: the camera footage, the children's whispered truths, the forged receipts, the investigators' findings, and now the undeniable proof of theft and financial manipulation. His grief had made him blind, but the truth, unearthed from the shadows, had given him sight. He looked at Leo and Lily, playing quietly in the living room, their laughter a balm to his wounded soul, and a fierce, unyielding determination solidified within him. The time for subtle observation was over. The time for justice had arrived. Arthur, his heart a fortress of fierce resolve, spent a sleepless night meticulously organizing the mountain of evidence he had painstakingly collected. The camera footage, transferred to a secure drive, played on a loop in his mind, each frame a fresh stab of pain, a renewed surge of righteous anger. The forged receipts, the intercepted messages, the pawn ticket for Clara's locket. Each document was a nail in Elara's coffin of deceit. He had contacted his most trusted legal counsel, a formidable woman named Evelyn Reed, known for her sharp intellect and unwavering pursuit of justice. Her voice, calm and reassuring even over the phone, had affirmed the strength of his case. The police, too, had been discreetly informed, their presence requested for a formal confrontation, ensuring that Elara would be apprehended without incident, her reign of terror brought to an immediate end. Arthur wanted no dramatic scenes in front of his children, no further trauma inflicted upon their fragile spirits. He would ensure justice was served with precision and unwavering resolve, protecting Leo and Lily above all else. The next morning, the air in Blackwood Manor felt heavy, charged with an unspoken tension, a calm before the storm. Arthur had arranged for Alara to meet him in his study, ostensibly to discuss household matters. He had dressed impeccably, a suit of dark charcoal, his posture erect, his gaze steely, a stark contrast to the emotionally fractured man he had been just weeks prior. Evelyn Reed arrived shortly after, her presence a quiet force of legal authority, accompanied by two plainclothes officers who positioned themselves discreetly outside the study door, their presence known only to Arthur. He had ensured the children were safely occupied in the north wing, engrossed in a specially arranged playdate with a trusted nanny, far removed from the impending tempest. He wanted them to remember Alara as a fading nightmare, not a dramatic spectacle. When Alara entered the study, her usual composed demeanor was subtly marred by a flicker of unease, a nervous dart of her eyes towards the closed door. She smiled, a practiced, almost robotic gesture, asking if there was anything amiss, her voice a little too sweet, a little too innocent. Arthur met her gaze, his own eyes revealing nothing of the storm brewing within him. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk, a chair that now felt like an interrogation seat, and waited. Evelyn Reed, her expression neutral, sat beside him, a silent sentinel. Arthur began, his voice low and steady, a deceptive calm masking the fury beneath. He spoke of trust, of responsibility, of the sanctity of a home. Watching Alara's carefully constructed mask begin to crack, a tiny tremor in her hand as she clasped them together. He started with the financial discrepancies, presenting the forged receipts, detailing the unauthorized expenditures. Alara's eyes widened, a flash of surprise, then a quick recovery, as she attempted to deflect, to invent elaborate explanations about unforeseen costs and necessary repairs. Her voice grew slightly shriller, her denials more fervent, but Arthur remained unyielding, allowing her to dig her own grave of lies. Then came the revelation of Clara's locket, the pawn ticket laid bare on the polished mahogany, its stark numbers and signature a cold testament to her avarice. Alara gasped, a sharp, involuntary sound, her face draining of color, the mask finally slipping, revealing a flicker of genuine fear. She stammered, attempting to conjure another excuse, but the words caught in her throat, strangled by the irrefutable evidence. Arthur then played a carefully selected segment of the hidden camera footage, the chilling scene of Alara deliberately tripping Leo, followed by her cruel scolding, her face contorted in a sneer as she crumpled Lily's drawing. The images flickered across the screen, a silent, damning indictment. Alara watched, her breath shallow, her body rigid, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. The final clip showed her on the phone, discussing the plan, and Arthur's blindness, her voice dripping with contempt. When the screen went dark, the silence in the room was deafening, punctuated only by Alara's ragged breathing. Her carefully cultivated image of devotion and subservience shattered into 1,000 pieces, revealing the monstrous motivations beneath. A guttural sound escaped Alara's throat, a strangled cry of rage and resentment, her composure finally collapsing under the relentless weight of the truth. She sprang to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, her eyes blazing with a malevolent fire. "You think you're so clever, don't you, Mr. Thorne?" she spat, her voice raw with unbridled fury, no longer bothering to hide the venom. "Always so high and mighty, with your grand manner and your endless fortune, while I slaved away, watching you wallow in your grief, ignoring those children, ignoring everything. You deserve to suffer. You deserve to lose everything, just like I did." Her words twisted, warped by years of festering bitterness, revealing a deep-seated envy and a twisted sense of victimhood. She railed against his wealth, his perceived indifference, her own struggles, portraying herself as a wronged individual, entitled to a share of his opulence. Her outburst was a torrent of accusations, a desperate attempt to shift blame, to justify her heinous actions, but it only served to underscore the depth of her depravity, her complete lack of remorse, and the chilling extent of her calculated malice. The officers, hearing her explosive outburst, entered the study, their presence a stark reminder of the law's unyielding hand. Ilara, momentarily stunned by their appearance, tried to regain her composure, her eyes darting wildly, but it was too late. Her carefully constructed world of lies had imploded, exposing her true, ugly nature for all to see. Arthur watched her, a profound sadness mingling with his anger. This woman, consumed by her own darkness, had sought to destroy the innocence of his children, to desecrate the memory of his beloved Clara, all for the sake of greed and resentment. But her reign was over. Justice, though slow, had finally arrived, a beacon cutting through the suffocating gloom she had cast over Blackwood Manor. He simply nodded to the officers, a silent command, and they moved swiftly, efficiently, to apprehend Ilara, her protests and renewed accusations fading into the background as they led her away, her final desperate cries echoing hollowly through the once silent halls. With Ilara's malevolent presence finally removed from Blackwood Manor, a profound sense of relief, like a cleansing rain, washed over the ancient stones, allowing the light to stream in once more. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of legal proceedings, but Arthur, fortified by Evelyn Reed's expertise and the undeniable evidence, navigated it with a quiet strength he hadn't known he possessed. Ilara Vance was convicted, her web of lies unraveled in a court of law, her punishment a just consequence for her calculated cruelty. The children, shielded from the harsh realities of the trial, slowly began to unfurl, their resilience a testament to their innate innocence and the burgeoning love that now enveloped them. Arthur, stripped bare of his emotional armor, embraced his role as a father with a fierce devotion, his heart aching for the lost time, yet overflowing with a renewed purpose. He held them close, whispered promises of unwavering protection, and filled their days with laughter, stories, and the simple, profound joy of being truly seen and loved. 2 years later, Blackwood Manor, once a monument to Arthur's grief and isolation, had transformed into a vibrant sanctuary, alive with the joyful echoes of childhood. The sprawling gardens, once meticulously manicured but rarely enjoyed, now bore the gentle imprint of small hands, filled with vibrant flowers planted by Lily and Arthur, their shared moments of digging in the rich earth, a metaphor for their own healing. Lily, now a bright-eyed 8-year-old, chattered endlessly as she tended her small patch of petunias, her drawings, no longer crumpled, adorning every available surface in the house, vibrant testaments to her blossoming spirit. She would often proudly declare to her father, "Look, Daddy, it's us, all happy." And Arthur would smile, his heart swelling with a love so profound it often brought tears to his eyes, a welcome contrast to the tears of sorrow he had once known. Leo, a robust 8-year-old, thrived in the warmth of his father's unconditional affection and the consistent, loving care he now received. His once timid spirit had blossomed into a curious, adventurous nature, his laughter ringing through the halls as he chased Lily through the grand rooms, their games a symphony of joy. Arthur would often find them curled up on the plush rug in the library, engrossed in a story, his arm wrapped protectively around both of them, his presence a comforting anchor in their lives. Family meals were no longer silent, somber affairs, but lively gatherings filled with shared stories, light-hearted banter, and the clinking of silverware against fine china, a symphony of domestic bliss. The manor, once a cold, empty shell, was now a home, brimming with the palpable warmth of genuine connection, a testament to the enduring power of truth, courage, and the boundless capacity of a father's love to heal even the deepest wounds. The journey had been arduous, marked by darkness and despair, but it had ultimately led to a profound awakening, a rediscovery of the most precious treasures in life. Arthur, no longer defined by his wealth or his grief, had found his true fortune in the laughter of his children, the light in their eyes, and the unwavering embrace of their small, trusting arms. His promise to Clara, made in the silent depths of his sorrow, was finally being fulfilled, not through material possessions, but through a love that transcended all boundaries, a home rebuilt on foundations of compassion and unwavering protection. What would you do to protect a child, to mend a broken spirit, to rebuild a life shattered by malice? Share your thoughts and join us in championing the innocent, for in every act of kindness, every stand for truth, and every embrace of unconditional love, we build a better world, one heart at a time.